So talk to me about, you look back at 2015. What have been some big highlights for you of the year?
Man, a huge highlight was at the beginning of 2015, I began homeschooling my son because the teacher that he had was just emotionally damaging to him. And so I pulled him out, and what was kind of a rub is that we owned the school. My husband and I had started a Montessori school, and so we owned the school, and so there was a part of us that felt like, how do we not see this? And so instead of getting sued by every parent in the school for shutting the school down before the year was over, we just pulled him out and let the last semester run, and obviously had some heart-to-heart conversations with some staff, but he came home, and I just remember being so weighted by what is his future going to be like? And I don't mean when is he going to, what's he going to be like when he's 25? Just what does the next year look like for him? Because it really was damaging to him. And by the end of the school year, we had closed the school without any real drama. So we closed the doors, and over the summer took a tour of a ton of schools and found one both of us had a piece about, and our children absolutely love. And so for that to be off of our plate and their, school to be where they love, that was like a huge blessing in our life. So to have owned a school and to not anymore, and then, just all the finances of it. Like we sold all the supplies, and what debt we had acquired, it sold for that exact amount. So we literally closed the doors, are debt free, and our children are going to a school that they love. And it was like, that's God's provision of just for that, and it sounds so eloquent, but, to say it right now, but it was like a really weighted year for us about our children. And then after they started there and it was going so well, I was offered the Big Daddy Weave Tour, which basically just kind of planned out our next year, because it's 110 shows, and there's these chunks of break, so you can just plan to be a family. And so it was like God kind of just continuing to provide, if you trust me, I've got this. And so, so 2015 was weighted, and the weight has been lifted, and everything is good. It's really good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me, like, for a mom or a dad that's listening, that's thinking, boy, I know my kid is having some issues at school. And I guess what for you was like the crossing point, that tipping point where you're like, you know what, we need to engage here. We need to take some action. What were you seeing?
Well, I just think when there's what's could be, irreversible damage being done, someone telling your child something that's not true about themselves. Like, you need meds, for someone to say that to your child is never appropriate, and it's actually not true about my son. But just for them to not be flourishing. If they're not flourishing, something's wrong. And so you need to investigate, and it could be that you need to be more involved. It could be that your child's not giving it their all, and you need to find a way to inspire them. And it could be that their educator is a jerk, and you have to respond to that. And I also don't want my children to be raised in a home where it's like every time there's a hiccup, let mommy and daddy come just snatch you out and fix it and do something different,
Right.
At some point, they have to learn that life is not perfect in any way. So you have to respond like, okay, this is an unpleasant situation, so how can we best deal with it? And sometimes it's to stick with it and get creative and maybe change this or that or the other. And sometimes it's to walk away, and it sometimes can be hard to do that. But yeah, so that's the only life they knew academically, and it has proved to be a really beneficial, academic foundation for them to have had. And now they're in a more traditional setting, and they're just flourishing. And so I'm an advocate for both. I was a huge Montessori fan. I think at one point I was probably feeling like that was kind of the only way.
Yeah.
Just because it really is so amazingly fantastic the way that style of education is child-directed, and there's no ceiling, and they, if they're ready for something, then they just keep going. There's not a ceiling to say, nope, we're going to wait till next year for that. They can be the sponge that they are. And so they had that privilege of being there for kind of those fundamental years, but they're in a more traditional setting now, but it's a little bit more like real life, that you're going to have to deal with things that are unpleasant sometimes, and it's teaching them more life skills as well. And so kind of pairing it together, I think they're kind of fortunate to have both. But yeah, so for parents, just talk to them. Talk to your kiddos. And, when the lights are out and you're about to walk out of the room, just ask the question one more time, like, is there anything else you need to tell me, talk to me about? Like, because I've got your back no matter what. You can tell me anything. And it was that night that I was about to leave his room, and he was like, Mom, sometimes I feel scared of my teacher. And I was like, whoa, like scared?
Yeah, that's a powerful word to use.
It's a powerful word. And he talked about some things that were a little more physical that shouldn't be in the classroom, and that he just felt like, he said, I know I don't work as hard as I should. He said, but sometimes I feel afraid to ask a question because I feel like I'm going to be made him feel embarrassed if I ask.
He told you need meds or something. It's like, come on.
And so it was just one of those like, whoa, hold on, get out of bed. Come in here, we're going to have a talk. And just lavishing your child with like, this is not your fault. I'm the grown up. I need to make some decisions here. And so I need to hear you. I need for you to be heard. And I mean, he's seen me cry more times than I think he wants to about it. Because like when I've talked about how much he loves his school now and he's making A's and just, and I'm not anti-meds. Like some people need medication for all kinds of things. And so that's not my soapbox at all. But for him, he didn't. And he was kind of made to feel like something's wrong with him. And I was like, buddy, that's just not what you need. And so I think he's had a renewed sense of confidence. And man, and I talk about it and I start to cry, and he's like, Mom. But I'm like, man, I love you so much. Like, I'm accountable for you, and I want to do what's best for you. And I'm glad that we, and he's like, it's fine. It's fine now. He's like, you didn't know. And so he's just been really gracious kiddo.
It's amazing how resilient they are.
They are. And so don't forget that.
Yeah.
They are resilient. So if you're like, oh, another change, or what do I do? Am I doing... They're pretty resilient, but don't take
that
advantage.
for granted.
Yeah, totally.
So we know you as the singer-songwriter, but now you're also published author.
Yeah.
Tell me about the book.
The book is kind of my story from birth to just a few years ago, and probably a highlight of the book is the crash and burn and rebuild of my marriage. Went up in smoke, and as we all know, ash and soot is worthless. And you can't breathe in smoke. But when we both individually decided to choose, what do you want, God? What do you want me to do? And really listened and responded to that. He turned that smoke into life-giving oxygen to our lungs, which is hope, which there always is hope. And he took the soot and the ash and he made something beautiful out of it. And he gave us a platform. And I've never, ever looked back. Like I've just seen... And I've been really inspired by the fact that God, Beth Moore says God wants to take your pain and give it purpose. And he does. And I think too often we think he caused it. And Mike Weaver from Big Daddy Weave says every night before he's leading worship in a song that talks about our Father, about how so many of us have had fathers that maybe didn't represent who Christ really is or who God really is and hurt you. And he's like, I'll tell you right now, God did not do that. And he's just really bold about it, like God did not hurt you. God doesn't hurt you. And hurt is because we're in a fallen world. It's a byproduct of the free choice that we have. And sometimes we're the cause of hurt, and sometimes we are the recipient. And so the good thing about God is that he can use it to bring you close to him. He can use it to make something beautiful out of, to give you a platform that you would have never otherwise had. And I think too often people are so resentful and bitter at him because they think he did that or he allowed that.
He's in control, right?
So, come on. And I think, and this is just my own personal philosophy here, but so I'll preface that. But I think God is able to be so patient and so gracious because he sees our start. He knows exactly he knows every detail of what has happened up until this point for our current present to look the way that it does. He also knows every single detail of our finish line. And he's excited about that because we exist to glorify him and to be in relationship with him. And he is chasing hard after us. Like we don't physically, like I'm a visual learner. So like if you visually think of, yourself in pursuit of Christ and trying to earn this forgiveness or this grace or this mercy or this perfection, you're just going to wear yourself out. Just stop right now. Just stop and just say yes. Yes, God. What is it you want me to do? Who do you want me to be? He is already in like reckless pursuit of you. And he just wants you to stop and say yes. And so I know as Christians, the terminology we use sometimes can, at least to me, it can be a little confusing, especially for someone who may not be in a Christian or living in the church, that, you know, in our pursuit of Christ, like that gets used a lot. And it's like, it gives this image of like pursuit, chasing after.
Right.
And it's like...
It sounds like hard work.
It does. And there's even a worship song, without, you know, throwing it under the bus, that it's like, you know, we're chasing after you. And it's like, no, we don't need to be. You know, he's chasing after us. We need to surrender to him. That's what we need to do. That's way easier to just say, okay, you can have it all. Now, what do you want to do with it? And don't think for 1 second he's not going to tell you. And I think when he doesn't tell us in that split second that we think he should, like, he's got perfect timing, you know? And so I think he doesn't, and going back to that, like all the choices and how hurt can either be inflicted or caused, like he knows what he can use it for, so he just doesn't freak out. Yeah. He's like, oh my gosh, you know, I know you're hurting right now, but I'm first of all right here with you. I'm suffering with. I also know your finish line, and it's fantastic. It's super exciting, number 2. And number 3, you have no idea what beautiful thing I'm going to get to do with this. And I think like you're catching me a little bit on a high, because I have friends that have been in a marriage crisis, completely separated, moved out, filed for divorce. He's got his own apartment, his own entire life, 90 miles away. And she has been praying relentlessly for 14 months. And I got a text this morning on my phone from him that said, can I please get your husband's number? God has got me. And I drove a train into my family and wrecked it. But I've been faced with a wife that's offering forgiveness, and I can only believe that's from God. Can I get your husband's number? And because
give me goosebumps. That is awesome. I love that.
He knows about our broken story. And so I was just like bawling my eyes out in the bunk on my bus, because I was like, yes. And then I called my husband, and I was like, you know, he's going to call you. And he said, bring it. Like, I might be, tell him that I'll be on the plane from here to here. But, you know, if I'm not on the plane, I'll take his call. I would love to talk to him. And it just, like, another one has come home, you know. And so I get to tell my story, and it's that we reconciled. But, like, I'm getting these other stories of like 14 months that have felt like 14 years to her. 4 children, homeschooling them, you know, all of age to know what's going on, and devastated. And tonight he's reading them a letter of remorse and asking for their forgiveness, and telling them that he knows it's going to be a journey, but if you could ever trust me again, I want to be your dad. And, you know, God's heard your prayers for me, because I want to come back. And I mean, you can't even talk to her without just her being a sopping mess. And she's just like, we serve an astonishing God. Yeah. So just don't give up hope. There's always hope. And our story looked that way for a while as well. And man, God's good.
So walk me through that a little bit, because as we listen to the music and hearing songs like Lord, I'm Ready Now, you can hear that process. So walk us through. Tell us what happened.
So we got really busy. And a mentor of mine, Trisha Davis, posted a quote from another author on her Instagram the other day, that God can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. And I was like, ouch, you know, and he did. Like, we were super, super busy. We over-purchased a house. We, you know, over-invested in a school. We, you know, had the cars, and we had the schedule, and somehow we thought busy gave off like, oh yeah, we're doing good things. We're good. We're important or whatever. And, you know, when it's really busy, it's usually a little noisy. And when you're busy and it's loud, you don't necessarily hear God as clearly say, stop. No, don't, you know. And so we just kept filling our life with seemingly good things that were just one more distraction, one more really loud clanging cymbal. And we were just like eventually just disconnected. And for me, evil kind of creeped in and just gave me a tremendous amount of fear and panic and anxiety. And for my husband, he gave him some kind of, I don't want to say it's courage, but I can't think of another word right now, but his choice was to walk away from his family, from his faith, and move out and start a whole new life. And so he left. And so I'm at the feet of Jesus begging, but in panic and anxiety and fear and, oh my gosh, what if this is mine? What can I do? What can I do? And to some extent that's good, but like it was just out of not necessarily true surrender. It was just out of fear and panic. Kind of like you get your hand caught in the cookie jar and you're like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, and what can I do? And I'll make another batch, and you know, and it was like, God, I feel like had been trying to get my attention for quite a while, and it was just like, you don't have to freak out. You know, I've been watching this unfold. And my husband's response obviously was to just walk away from everything, from church, from everything. And so there we stood, separated. And at some point in our story, I called a lawyer just to kind of get some advice, to kind of almost just to be cautious of what I should plan for. Because I was mama duck, you know, I had these 3 babies, and I was like, I don't want to be naive that he wouldn't take everything away. You know, I didn't think he would leave, so I don't know what else he is capable of. And so just kind of out of protection and provision, I contacted them, and they said they couldn't speak with me because they were already representing my husband. And that was a low point. If you've all seen the movie The Holiday with Jude Law, I think it is, and what's her name? I just forgot her name. Anyway,
I didn't see
where she's like, low point, like she's having a low point in her day. I always remember that line. But anyway,
like, this is it.
This is a low point. I'm like, low point. Like that day was just crushing. And I was like, oh, it's happening. It's happening. It's happening. Oh my goodness. And, you know, turns out, fast forward, you know, years later, you know, he wasn't actually filing. He was doing the same thing I was doing of like, you know, my wife and I are separated. What do I need to do to kind of protect my assets, and how are we going to divide things up, and what do I need to be planning for, and all that. But we were apart, and fast forward, just because that's why I wrote a book, because it's a whole story. So I tell the whole story in the book. But yeah, God was one night. I was in my kitchen, my oversized kitchen. The bank was taking the house at the same time, and I had some very unpleasant results come back from a doctor about myself that ended up being okay. But so I had that on me, and the bank calling, and the husband's gone, and the house is huge and empty, and there's 3 babies asleep at the other end of the hall, and just feeling completely overwhelmed, completely devastated, and really feeling hopeless for the first real time in my life. And the radio station in my kitchen, we had one of those radios where you can kind of sit your iPhone in it and it'll play your playlist, but it can otherwise just be an FM radio station. So the only station really that came in, there was just a few stations because we lived out in the country, and it was a Christian station. And I hear Aaron Shust singing, "My hope is in you, Lord, all the day long. I won't be shaken by drought or storm." And when I heard that, I was like, I'm in a hurricane, and I just hit my knees. And it was like this, the radio was kind of placed in this little cutout where it's like a desk almost. And so I was kneeling at the desk, because the counter is obviously a little too high for my short elbows. I'm not a tall person, ladies and gentlemen. But I could reach there, and I was kind of kneeling at it, and I just kept listening. And the next song was Third Day, I Need a Miracle. And the next song was Matthew West, Strong Enough. And then the next song was Mandisa, Stronger. And then it was Sanctus Real, Lead Me. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on. Number one, I've been a part of an industry that is doing for the hopeless what this music is doing for me. And I've taken that for granted. I have thought I was cooler than Christian music, that I was more relevant, that when I first signed, I was sort of simultaneously released as a Christian and a general market artist. And it was like, oh yeah, I'm all that in a bag of chips. And just really not connecting with how powerful Christian radio is, and that I was a part of that. I was like, there have been people that feel the way I feel right now, and they've turned on a radio, and maybe one of my songs has been one of those songs that's given life, giving hope to their lungs. And I just began to bawl my eyes out. And I was just like, forgive me. Oh my gosh. Like, hold on. Let's start with me before I'm going to sit here and beg you to fix my husband. Fix me. And so I deserved kind of a finger in my face. And I just felt like God met me there that night with the kids asleep. Like he just wrapped his arms around me and was like, I forgive you. You can start all over. And I know how this story ends. So if you'll trust me, it's pretty fantastic. And it was like, I have no reason not to trust you because unfortunately you're all I've got. And I almost felt sad that I'd finally come to him in that way when there was nothing left. And he was like, I don't care. I don't care. You're here. And so let's make this new. And so I've felt this renewed sense of hope, not just through the songs, but that I wanted to be a part of that in a different way than I had been. And I felt like if I'm going to still be a part of that, I don't know how I would be able to do that as a single mother of 3. So maybe this marriage is going to work out. Maybe. And God's going to repurpose me here. And we'll just see. And so I had kind of this like, I don't know, like this adrenaline rush of like, I'm forgiven. And he's totally wiped me clean. And I have a second chance. And I don't know if that's going to involve being married to Jeremy Lee or not. But I know that Jesus matters more. And I just fell in love with Jesus for the first real time. And for as a woman especially, well, you want to feel protected, you want to feel provided for, you want to feel loved, no matter what you look like or what's going on in your life. And it was like I had all that in Jesus in that moment. It was like, oh man, you're here, you're providing, you're protecting, you're loving, you're never ever leaving. And so I just kind of, this crush came over my heart, like a romantic crush on him. And it was just this new moment in my life. And that's when Lord, I'm ready now was like, I don't want to be her anymore. I don't want to be that girl. I want to be who you died for me to be, because that is where I will experience the most joy and the most peace and the most hope and the most contentment, with or without Jeremy Lee. And so that was going on with me. And 20 miles down the road where my husband was living with his parents at the time, God was doing something there that I had no clue about. And I think he was like making these people new before he made this marriage new. And so 18 months from when we separated, we completely remarried each other. And he had a surprise wedding. Like, the ladies love the pictures in the book. I have the pictures of the wedding in the book. But he planned it, and I didn't know anything about it. It was a completely rogue. Like, he had my tour manager, who's one of his best friends, set up white chairs. Our pastor was there. My keyboard player's playing the accordion. He dressed the kids as ring bearers and flower girl, and had wedding dresses hanging from trees for me to choose from, and my girlfriends all, with black sheets to make a tent for me to change into. And I was blindfolded, and so he proposes all over again in the same place we were engaged, and takes the blindfold off, and he said, marry me right now and turn around. And I turn around, and I don't even think crying is an appropriate term, because it was like I was gasping. I couldn't cry hard enough. I just couldn't cry hard enough. And I was like, this is redemption. And evil's been defeated, and this is what it looks like when the community of the church, and 40 of our closest friends were all there to celebrate. They weren't there to condemn Jeremy for leaving. They weren't there to throw a stone at me for being a self-centered idiot. They were there to celebrate what God can do and does. And man, it was a beautiful day. And we had a cake, and he rented a hotel or a restaurant for the reception and a cake, and then we went to a hotel and just had a whole new honeymoon. And it was just a whole new thing. And I think to this day, my favorite mental picture in all of that was watching my daughter walk around the corner. I mean, I can't even hardly talk about that. Like, just her life. I mean, our children's life, but like, she and I have a thing. Like, I call her my true north. Like, we're just really connected. And her life was changed forever that day. Like, forever. And she saw something that she didn't even know what the alternative really could have been. Like, she just knew it's peculiar that Daddy doesn't live at home. Yeah. And suddenly Daddy's back at home, and why is my mom crying her eyes out, And it was just, I just kept telling her I was happy. Like, I'm just happy. This is what happy looks like. She's like, that's interesting, because you look scary, because your face is all shriveled up. But But yeah, and so we committed that day forever that we will tell that story until we're blue in the face. And I know that there's a target on our back from evil saying, shut it down, shut it down. But it's like, well, bring it on, because I've seen God be the champion. He wins. He always wins. If you let him, he will always win. And he doesn't need us. When I say that, he doesn't need our permission to fight like that. He wants it, though. He wants us to want him to fight.
It's the whole point of the process, right?
It's, so whoever you are, whatever you're going through, like, give him the gloves. Take them off. Give them to him. Trust me, it will turn out so much better. And, and I know it's terribly easy to say now in hindsight, because when you're in it, it is truly, truly painful. Whatever, cancer, bankruptcy, divorce, whatever. But I have been there. So it's like, if you can just accept my word that it's true, like, I've been there, and I have woken up with bruising on my face from crying so hard that I burst the blood vessels. It's like if you've ever like really thrown up, like from a stomach virus really bad, and you have like these blotchy blood vessels that are burst in your face from the strain. Like, I cried that hard that I would wake up with bruising. And like, so I know pain. I know hurt. I know what hopeless feels like. But nothing's ever hopeless. It's really not, because of the cross and the resurrection. It's truly not. And man, that's a good thing to hear when you're hurting. So hear it.
How did God use your new single, Great Is Our God, in that and in your life?
My husband and I were driving down the road, newly reconciled, and my manager, who is like a brother to us, he manages another artist who actually has a couple different projects of his own. He's an independent artist. His name's Eric Marshall, but he has a band called the Last Royals, and he also has a worship project called Young Oceans. And so he's just, by way of having the same manager, has become a friend of mine. That's how we know each other. And so I was listening to his new project just a few years ago, and Great Is Our God came on. And then we rewind, like, we played it again. I was like, let's play that again. And we played it again, and both of us were like, man, this is a great song. And it just froze in my brain I was like, hold on, we're worshiping together. Like, this is the first time I can remember, like, we're both worshiping to the same song, loving the same song. And we would just kind of nod at our heads, and it's like, when we were separated, not even living in the same house, much less going to church together. And so it's like we were back together, and little things were starting to piece back. Like, we started saying, I love you. We started wearing our rings again. Like, these were all, weeks and weeks apart from each other, but like, there's little steps. And it was like, and we're actually in a car together singing a worship song together. And so Great Is Our God is just really sentimental to me, because it was kind of that, like, check me out. Like, God saying, look what I did. Mm-hmm. Now you're actually worshiping together. And I was like, I want this song on the next record. I write all my own music, and I didn't write this one, but I want this on the record, because it represents that full circle of, like, we are completely up in smoke, and now we have completely come full circle, and we're worshiping together. And the lyrics of it, it's based on Lamentations 3:23, which was a verse that I kept rewriting in my journal through our separation, was that his mercies are new every morning. And Great Is Our God is referring to that, like, morning by morning, like, his mercies are new. And that means he's the God of infinite chances, second chances, third chances. There's not like you've reached your limit. Like, nope. He knows your finish line. And so that's why he gives grace. And that's why he can, because he knows, he's all knowing. And so he understands why you got to where you're at, and he understands where you're going to end. So it's just easier imagine with your kids, if you knew exactly why they disobeyed in that moment. Like, you fully understood emotionally, psychologically, you fully understood why your son hit his sister. And you know what amazing thing is going to come out of that. Maybe they're going to be in ministry together one day as brother and sister. We'd be a lot more gracious as parents, because we'd be like, I'm not freaking out about that. Mm-mm. They're going to be in ministry together one day, and the reason that happened was because blah, blah, blah. We don't, as humans, know that, so we react and respond as humans. But God is able to really react and respond that way, because he's like, I get it. I know where this came from, and I know where it's headed, so I'm not freaking out. So yeah, so that's where Great Is Our God came from, and that's why it's on the record and why it means a lot to me.
In your book, you mentioned that each album that you've released really perfectly represents chapters of your life. So, kind of wrapping up here, what chapter of your life are you in right now?
What chapter am I in? Well, our pastor at home has been in a series called I Quit, and it's about like the things that you struggle with that kind of keep you from being more engaged in your relationship with Christ, or being fully kind of flourishing into who he wants you to be. And I really struggle with comparison. And so there was a day in this series when I was home, he had everybody go out into the lobby on this humongous whiteboard. He was like, just write a word or a sentence or whatever, like I quit, blah, blah, blah. And I went out there, and my little munchkins were with me, and like my daughter wrote something that didn't even make sense, which was kind of funny because it said I give up technology, which she is not addicted to technology in any way, shape, or form. So I don't know if she was
easy
like
one,
just
low-hanging fruit.
I'm just gonna write something. But my oldest, who pesters her quite a bit, I watched him write pestering, and he just kind of walked off. And I said, hey, and he kind of turned, and I said, God heard that, like he's gonna help you stop doing that. And he's like, I know. And I just stood there. And then I wrote it, and I was like comparing myself to everybody else. And it's like someone's body or their social media numbers or where their songs are at on the charts or how many records they've sold or how they're doing with their own finances and versus, how their house looks compared to mine. And just so desperately being like, ugh, why do I do that? But I do. And then as I started this tour, just the beginning of 2016, I was telling my husband how uncomfortable this tour was just on paper for me, because it was a tour where I don't bring out my band, which has never happened before. It requires that I'm away from home more days at a time than I'm accustomed to, which I was uncomfortable with as well. And they have a real time of worship and ministry that I'm not as accustomed to, that also made me a little uncomfortable of what's the expectation of me, because this is who I am, and maybe I'm a little different than them. And my husband said, you wrote you're going to quit comparing yourself and just kind of embrace who it is you are, right? And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, growth doesn't come from being comfortable. He said, so I feel like maybe God's allowing you to be really uncomfortable with some stuff so that you can really grow into who this is that he's made you to be, so that you're not as tempted or struggling with comparison, because you'll have that much more confidence that this is who I'm created to be. Even when it's been uncomfortable, God's seen me through that, and I've arrived at a place where I have more confidence in who that is. And so in 2016, I'm uncomfortable, and I'm growing, and I'm trying not to compare who I am. And so I'm just not entirely sure what that means to my music or to my family, but I know that it's going to affect all of it. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of to be continued. Like, let's talk in a year so we can talk about what 2016 looked like.
Let's do that. I'll take you up on that.
Okay.
So looking forward to the concert tonight.
Thank you.
So appreciate you just being so real and so vulnerable, and
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate you.
Thanks for letting me. You provided an atmosphere that I can. So thanks.
Awesome.